The Blossom Tree. Once upon a time, in the land of India, a rich merchant called Alima was to sail across the seas to sell his brocade and cotton and wool, jade and gems to parts of Europe and Central Asia. In those days, these trips would take months, so on the eve of his departure, the merchant's friends gathered at his home to wish him luck. As the merriment was going on, one of the friends asked the merchant in between bites of sweet bread,
Alima, you will be gone for months. You never told us as to which of us do you wish to look after your home, your estate, and your warehouse in your absence.
Oh, don't worry, brother. My Jigme will take care of all of it.
What? What? He? That Jigme who looks after your horses?
Yes, sure.
Are you all right, Alima? Jigme is just a poor herdsman, and you are leaving all your wealth in his care? What if he steals it and runs away? How foolish of you to trust a poor man who is just a servant, instead of us, who are your equals in status and wealth.
I have known Jigme for years. He is a good, faithful man, and I don't look at him as a servant. He is my friend.
Only equals can be friends, Alima. No matter how kind you are to a servant can never become a friend.
I disagree. Jigme has looked after me, been there for me like a friend.
He will not agree like that. Let us take him to the Buddha. Maybe the Buddha will be able to make him see his foolishness.
So the merchant's friends took him to where the Buddha was preaching under the banyan tree in the twilight. They explained the situation to the Buddha.
Tell him, sir, how can he trust a poor servant to look after all his wealth? Isn't it foolish, especially when we, his friends of equal stature, are ready to take care of everything while he is gone?
The Buddha simply smiled and told them a story.
A long time ago, there lived a king in Benares. The king loved gardening, and he spent many a happy hour in his beautiful garden at the palace. While he lovingly tended to all the flowers and trees and shrubs, there was one tree he loved the most, the tree of blossoms. Nobody knew how old the tree was, but it stood in the middle of the garden as a gigantic divine monster, whose roots went deep into the nether regions of the earth. And they said that its branches reached the heavens. The entire city of Benares was proud of this ancient tree that some thought could have been more than 1,000 years old. Anyone who saw it could not help but admire its strength and size. People who saw it were so stricken by it that nobody noticed a small tuft of kusha grass growing near its roots. One day, the king and the queen were sipping tea in the main chamber of the palace when suddenly a few particles of plaster fell on the king.
Plaster?
The king looked up and saw a crack in the ceiling that went right to the enormous pillar that held the ceiling. It was clear that the pillar was breaking, and if it was not replaced, the ceiling and the entire palace would collapse, killing everyone who was inside. The king saw the danger and immediately sent his servants and carpenters to search in the palace gardens to find a tree strong enough to build the enormous pillar with. The servants searched the gardens and came back with the news.
The only tree strong enough to build a pillar of this size is the blossom tree, sire.
Oh, my favorite tree. Are you sure?
We have looked at every tree in the palace gardens, but none of them is strong enough. None but the blossom tree. The king was saddened to think of his beloved blossom tree being cut down, but truly there was no other way.
I cannot risk the lives of so many people who stay in the palace just to save my beloved tree. Fine, cut it if you must.
The spirit of the blossom tree, and indeed the spirits of all the other trees and birds, sensed the disaster that was about to happen, that the ancient mystical blossom was to be cut down. The birds stopped chirping, the air became still, the garden became soaked in an aura of sadness and lifelessness. That is when the spirit of the kusha grass spoke to the blossom.
The next day, when the woodcutters came to cut the tree and were about to strike their axes on its bark,
Wait! The tree seems to be rotting here. See? The color of the bark.
Yes, and it is soft here. We cannot cut this tree down. It will never be strong enough to make the massive pillar. I do not understand. Just yesterday this tree was strong and tough and magnificent. And now it is rotting in pieces.
Maybe we were never meant to cut the tree down.
when the woodcutters went away, the birds began chirping again. The wind danced beautifully around the branches, and it was as though someone had infused new life and joy into the garden. The blossom tree became its own strong, magnificent self again. The other trees were shocked to see this.
Blossom, you are all well and healthy. How did you make your trunk look rotten?
Oh, it is all because of the spirit of my friend the Kusha. He spoke to the spirit of the chameleon, who then caused chameleons to climb on, sit on my trunk, and change their color to that of rotting bark. So, when the woodcutter saw it, it appeared as though my trunk was rotting.
But how did you make your trunk soft?
The clever chameleons moved quickly to where the woodcutters were touching the bark, so that instead of the trunk, they touched the soft bodies of the chameleons and thought that the trunk was soft and rotten.
Truly, Kusha, when we so-called mighty trees could do nothing to help our friend, it was your wisdom that saved his life. Thank you.
And with this, the Buddha stopped his story.
Friendship and trust are given to those who are wise and faithful. Wisdom and loyalty have nothing to do with the status of a person. We must look at the inherent qualities of a person rather than their outward appearances in terms of wealth, status, age, or occupation.
On hearing this, the merchant smiled at his friends, left the presence of the Buddha, humbled and wizened. Never again would they judge a person on the basis of money or status, but rather they would look at the values a person had, and if the person was wise and loyal, they would treat him or her with respect.